Picture a city of 3 million people. Now imagine that every single one of them is somehow, against all reasonable expectation, managing to live, breathe, work, sleep, eat, and die on top of each other in an area you could walk across in a morning. Now fill it with coal smoke so thick that on certain November days you genuinely cannot see your own hand in front of your face. Add a river running through the middle that is simultaneously the city's main highway, its primary source of drinking water, and its open sewer. Add slaughterhouses operating in the middle of densely populated neighbourhoods, the blood running freely down the gutters into that same river. Add hospitals built on medieval foundations, staffed by men who haven't yet figured out that washing their hands before cutting someone open might be a useful habit to develop. Add gaslight that flickers, add a fog that doesn't. That is London. Not some fantasy London of Sherlock Holmes and hansom cabs and jolly red-cheeked cobblers. The real London, 1863, population 3 million and growing, the largest city on the planet by a margin that would embarrass every other city on the planet. The richest city in the world and the most wretched city in the world, occupying precisely the same square miles of ground, sometimes the same square yards, sometimes the same building. A place where you could watch a duke's carriage rattle past a woman who hasn't eaten in 3 days. Where a man could make a fortune importing tea from Ceylon and lose it in the same afternoon to the cholera that came in with the tea ships. A place that builds cathedrals and slums with equal enthusiasm and never stops to wonder if there's a contradiction in that. We're going there tonight, not as tourists, not as people peering through coach windows at the picturesque poverty. We're walking, 5 in the morning, on foot, through the part of London that nobody puts in the guidebooks. I make these history stories, and I genuinely have no idea who listens to them at this hour. Some of you are trying to sleep, I assume. Some of you are probably doing something else entirely, using Victorian disease statistics as background noise while you live your comfortable modern lives. Either way, I appreciate you being here. Subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. This is going to take a while. Here we go. Your eyes open before the bell. That's the first thing you notice. There's no bell yet. No alarm. Nothing outside the window that could be called light in any honest sense of the word. Just darkness and the particular quality of cold that settles into an unheated room in a London November at something like 4:30 in the morning. For a moment, not a long moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 4, you don't know where you are. Then it hits you, the smell. It's not one smell, it never is in this city. It's a stack of them, layered like geological strata, each one pressing down on the one beneath. The top layer is coal, always coal. Somebody somewhere in this building started a fire before you woke, probably the landlady in her kitchen below, and the smoke has found its way up through the gaps in the floorboards and the thin walls because coal smoke in London doesn't go up the chimney and politely disappear. It spreads, it seeps, it coats the inside of your nostrils and the back of your throat, and eventually, after enough years of this, it coats the inside of your lungs too. Beneath that, mould. The wall beside your bed has a patch of black mould roughly the shape and size of the Isle of Wight. You've named it. In your head, obviously. Not out loud. You're not the sort of person who names mould. Beneath the mould, tallow. The candle you burned last night to read by before sleep. Tallow candles smell nothing like the beeswax ones the quality folk use. They smell like rendered animal fat, which is what they are. And the scent clings to cloth and hair with the dedication bordering on personal. Beneath the tallow, something you've stopped trying to identify, It comes from the house next door, and it is definitely organic, and it is definitely not pleasant. And beneath all of that, underneath everything, the smell of the river. Because you are in Southwark. Because Southwark is where you ended up when you came to London 6 months ago, with 22 shillings and a letter of introduction that turned out to be worth considerably less than 22 shillings. Because in Southwark everything smells of the Thames at low tide, which is to say, everything smells of the things 3 million people deposit into the Thames on a daily basis. You've stopped noticing it most of the time. That's what people mean when they say you get used to London. They don't mean you start to like it. They mean your brain gives up registering the smell as something unusual and files it instead under simply how the air works. Your brain has filed it. Welcome to Southwark, November 1863. You're lying on a straw mattress in a room barely wider than you are tall, on the second floor of a lodging house on Tooley Street, 70 yards from London Bridge and approximately 400 yards from the tanneries at Bermondsey, which means that when the wind comes from the east you get a bonus smell that no amount of coal smoke can fully suppress. Your name is Thomas Wick. You're 17 years old, and you came to London in May from a village called Heckington in Lincolnshire, which is flat and quiet and smells of nothing worse than sheep and October mud. You came because your father's farm had 1 farm and 4 sons, and arithmetic being what it is, the numbers didn't work. You came because Mr. Aldous Pratt, a solicitor in Sleaford who knew your father slightly, wrote a letter to his cousin who worked at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in the City of London, and the cousin owed Mr. Pratt a favour, and the favour was worth 1 junior porter's position. Back in Heckington, everyone said London would make you or break you. Usually when people in small villages say that sort of thing, they mean it as a warning, as though the city were something to be afraid of. They weren't wrong. It's just that you've decided 6 months in to let it make you rather than break you. The decision is mostly willpower, partly stubbornness, or partly the fact that going back to Heckington and admitting defeat would be somehow worse than staying and suffering. You're staying and suffering and getting better at both. The room has 1 window, roughly 8 inches by 14, its single pane of glass so old and uneven that it warps everything outside into something dreamlike and strange. Through it, you can see the gas lamp on Tooley Street. It's still burning. They don't put the lamps out until 6, which means you have at least another hour of that amber glow, thin and guttering in the river wind, suggesting rather than providing light. You need to be at Bart's by 6. Bart's is on the other side of the river, in the city. It's approximately 1.5 miles by foot, depending on which route you take. In summer, when the light comes early and the air is merely unpleasant rather than physically hostile, the walk takes you 35 minutes if you move with purpose. In November, in the dark, in the fog that rolls off the Thames every morning between 4 and 7, the river is exhaling all the misery it spent the night absorbing, the walk takes closer to 50 minutes, which means you need to get up now. The wooden floor under your bare feet is cold in a way that feels almost personal, not just cold and slightly damp and rougher than you remember from yesterday, which means the boards have swollen again in the night moisture, and you're going to get a splinter if you're not careful. You've already got a splinter in the base of your left thumb from a trolley handle at the hospital 3 days ago. It's a dull ache now rather than a sharp one, which either means it's healing or means it's gone deeper than you'd like to think about. You prod it once, wince, and decide not to think about it. Your clothes are on the chair. You put them there every night methodically, in order. Trousers, then shirt, then waistcoat, then coat. It's not a habit you had in Heckington. It's a habit you've developed here. Because losing 10 minutes in the dark looking for a sock is 10 minutes you don't have. The trousers are heavy wool, dark grey, bought second-hand from a stall on the Bermondsey Market in June, and already showing wear at the knees. The shirt is linen, or was once. Now it's something that was linen the way chalk is limestone. Technically descended from the same thing, but transformed by circumstance into something rather different. The waistcoat was new when you bought it. New second-hand, which in Bermondsey means someone else wore it until very recently, and the reasons for its sudden availability are best not inquired into too deeply. The coat is good. The coat is the one thing you have that is genuinely good. Heavy navy wool, brass buttons, the kind of coat a working man wears to indicate that he is a working man with some dignity about him. It cost you 11 shillings. That was nearly 2 weeks' wages. You didn't regret it for a moment. You dress in the dark, by feel, button by button, tuck by tuck. Then you lace your boots. The boots are the great ongoing negotiation of your life. They were adequate in May. In November they are letting in water at the left heel where the sole has started to separate from the upper, and the right boot has a crack across the toe that catches and gathers London mud with an efficiency you almost admire. You've stuffed the left boot with a piece of folded cloth that you replace every few days when it becomes saturated. It's not a solution. It's a conversation with the problem, a way of saying, I acknowledge you exist. Let's get through today. We'll deal with the rest later. You pull on the cloth piece now, fold it twice, tuck it against the heel, lace the boot tight, stand up. The floorboards creak. In this lodging house, everything creaks. The stairs creak. The walls creak when the wind gets behind them. Your landlady, Mrs. Bartholomew, creaks when she walks, which, given that she is 63 years old and has been climbing these stairs for 40 of them, is hardly surprising. You move carefully toward the door, avoiding the worst of the boards by memory, because the room beside yours belongs to Mr. Farrow, who drives wagons for a firm in Lambeth and works nights, which means he sleeps days, which means he has complained about being woken on 7 separate occasions and is working up to an 8th. You're not going to be the cause of that 8th. The key is in your coat pocket. You lock the door behind you. Pocket the key. The landing smells of yesterday's boiled cabbage and someone else's tobacco, and the particular human warmth of a building full of people sleeping. You go down the stairs, one careful foot at a time. The front door of Mrs. Pardew's lodging house opens onto Tooley Street, and Tooley Street at 4:30 in the morning in November is not a street so much as it is a suggestion. The fog has come in from the river. Not the gentle mist you might picture if someone said fog to you, some soft, gauzy, romantic diffusion of morning light. No. London fog in 1863 is a substance. It has weight and colour and texture. It is yellow-grey, the yellow coming from the cold smoke that has been accumulating in it all night, and the grey coming from the river damp, and the combination produces something you could not call fresh air with any honesty at all. It is air in the way that porridge is water. Technically the same thing. Significantly more difficult to breathe. The gas lamp on the corner is still burning, and its light makes a globe of amber in the grey about 15 yards in diameter, soft and fuzzy at the edges, and beyond the edges of that globe. Nothing. Just fog. You can hear things. Footsteps somewhere to the right. Someone moving with purpose. Probably a night worker heading home. The clop of a horse, slow and patient, somewhere up the street. The sound of the river, which doesn't stop, which never stops. a low chuckling that is either water over stones or things in the water you would prefer not to think about. You can feel the cold on your face immediately. Your breath puffs white into the fog, adding to it in a small way, your own personal contribution to London's atmospheric situation. You pull your coat tighter across your chest and start walking toward the bridge. Your feet know this route now. 6 months of walking it twice daily in every kind of weather has embedded it into your body at some level below conscious thought. Turn left here. Step up onto the curb here because the road dips and fills with water. You don't take the shortcut through the court off Bermondsey Street because twice you've turned that corner and found men whose expression suggested they were not pleased to see you. You walk. London Bridge at 5 in the morning. You've thought about how to describe London Bridge to someone who hasn't walked it in the dark, in the fog in November 1863, and you keep coming back to the same inadequate words. Massive, stone, old, busy. None of those words quite do it. The bridge you're walking across was completed in 1831, 32 years old. Brand new by London standards, which measures things in centuries. The old London Bridge, the one with the houses on it, the one with the severed heads on spikes at the gatehouse, the one that stood for 600 years before they finally admitted it, was more of a disaster than a structure, came down in 1832. You know this because Mr. Clegg, the senior porter at Bart's, told you, unsolicited, in the way that Mr. Clegg tells you many things unsolicited, on your third day of work. The old bridge, Mr. Clegg had said, in the tone of a man delivering important intelligence, had 19 arches and shops on both sides, and it blocked the river so badly that the Thames froze over regular as clockwork every winter. Frost fairs on the ice. They used to roast oxen on the frozen Thames, Thomas. Oxen. On a river. Now the bridge has 5 arches, and the river doesn't freeze, and we've lost the oxen roasting entirely. You weren't sure how to respond to that, so you said, "Is that so, Mr. Clegg?" and went back to work. But walking the bridge in the dark, you find yourself thinking about those 5 arches beneath your feet, about the water pressing through them, forced and squeezed, the river running faster and colder where the bridge constrains it. The bridge is granite, not the raw unfinished granite of quarries, but dressed stone, cut and fitted with a precision that still astonishes you every time you think about it. The approach ramps curve up gently on both sides, and the parapet is low enough that on a clear day you can see the whole reach of the river, upstream to Waterloo Bridge, downstream to the Pool of London where the ships gather. Not today. Today you can see perhaps 15 feet over the parapet. Just fog and the suggestion of dark water below. There are other people on the bridge. Not many. This is 5 in the morning. Even London thins out at 5 in the morning, but several. A woman carrying a basket of something that smells of fish. A man in a leather apron whose purpose you can't determine. 2 boys, younger than you, running in the direction of Billingsgate Market, which opens at 5, and which is, in its own specific way, the most overwhelming sensory experience available to a person in London, if you do not count the tanneries, and you do not count the tanneries because you are still unable to think about the tanneries without your eyes watering. Your boots ring on the stone of the bridge. The sound is clear and precise in the foggy air, strangely isolated, like the sound is happening in a room rather than outside. You put your hand on the parapet as you walk. The stone is cold, not the cold of metal or glass, which pulls heat from your fingers aggressively, almost angrily. Stone cold is gentler than that. It takes your warmth slowly, patiently, the way the river takes everything, without hurry and without apology. The stone has been cold for 32 years. Your hand is just one more thing passing over it. You can feel the grain of it, the fine scoring the stonecutters left when they dressed the blocks, the slight roughness under your palm as you move. Below you, the Thames. You know it's there by the sound more than by sight. A low shifting sound, water and current and the things that ride the current. A smell, too, richer and ranker here than on the street. The river breathing up through the fog, mud and salt, and the particular organic richness of a waterway that is doing too many things at once. The Thames at this hour is not romantic. The Thames in 1863 is a biological event. It's been 3 years since the Great Stink, when the summer heat made the river smell so catastrophically bad that Parliament had to abandon its riverside chambers and debate from rooms on the far side of the building. Curtains soaked in chloride of lime hung over the windows in a futile attempt to manage the situation. The Great Stink was the moment London's politicians finally accepted that having the main sewer and the main drinking water source be the same body of water was not, perhaps, an ideal arrangement. They've started building a proper sewer system now. Joseph Bazalgette's embankment project. You've seen the construction, the great trenches cut through the streets, the gangs of navvies working by torchlight. It's not finished yet. The river is better than it was 3 years ago. But better is a relative term. Your feet move steadily across the bridge. Left boot, right boot, left boot, right boot. The familiar slight pull at the left heel where the cloth patch has already started to shift. You adjust it with a small flexing motion, curling your toes, repositioning the pad. It settles, not perfectly, never perfectly, good enough to walk on. The north bank approaches out of the fog. Gas lamps on the city approach. The sound of the city increasing, just slightly. The way a sound increases when you move from one room into a larger one. You step off the bridge onto the north side and London swallows you. The city of London at 5 in the morning is a different creature from the city at 9. At 9, it is a roar. A press of humanity and commerce and carriage wheels and animal noise and the shouting of men with things to sell and things to buy. A density of economic activity per square yard that has no parallel anywhere on the planet in 1863. At 5, it is not quiet. London is never quiet, but it is something closer to quiet than anything you'll hear here for the rest of the day. The streets are wet, not from rain, it hasn't rained tonight, but from the fog itself, which has been condensing on every surface it touches for the past 6 hours, settling into the channels between cobblestones, beading on iron railings, turning the window sills to dark, wet lines. Your boots on the cobbles make a sound different from the sound they made on the bridge granite. Cobbles are irregular, and the spaces between them are irregular. And water has settled in those spaces, and so each step produces a small wet scrape and something between a click and a clunk, nothing like the clean ring of stone. You walk north, away from the bridge, up King William Street, then right along Cannon Street, then north again, threading through the city's medieval street plan that was old when Shakespeare was born and is old still. The streets turning and doubling back on themselves in ways that make no rational sense, and yet somehow always get you where you're going if you know them well enough. You know them well enough now. You pass a lamplighter on his rounds. He is walking ahead of you, extinguishing the gas lamps with a long pole, the lights going out behind him one by one like the ticking off of items on a list. He doesn't acknowledge you. You don't acknowledge him. At 5 in the morning, the city's workers are not social. They have jobs. The jobs are separate. The cobbles here are wetter than on Tooley Street. There's a spot near the bottom of Cannon Street where the road dips and the drain blocks reliably. and the water that collects there is not water you want to step in if you have any choice in the matter. You step around it. Wide left, tight against the building on the far side, your right shoulder brushing the brick. The brick is cold against your coat. The coat is thick enough that you don't feel it directly, just the slight resistance of fabric against stone, the way your weight shifts when something pushes back. There's a bakery somewhere ahead. You can smell it before you see it. Bread, yeast, the deep warm smell of something that has been baking since midnight. Because a bakery in 1863 starts its work at midnight if it wants to have loaves ready for the morning trade. The smell hits you like a wall of warmth, which it isn't literally, but your brain interprets the smell of warm bread as warmth, even when you're standing in cold fog, and the warmth is entirely olfactory. You slow down slightly, not stopping, just slowing. The smell fades as you pass. You walk faster again. Cheapside at 5:10. Cheapside is where London starts waking up, and it starts waking up in stages, and the stage you're walking through now is the animal stage. The horses come first. The city's commerce runs on horses. Horses pulling drays, horses pulling cabs, horses pulling the great wagons that bring goods in from the country. At 5 a.m, the stables are already alive. You can hear them before you turn onto Cheapside, the particular restless shuffling of large animals being harnessed for work, the occasional short sharp stamp of a hoof on the stable floor, the creak of a harness being tightened. The smell is different from the river smell. Horse dung has a directness to it, a sort of blunt honesty compared to the complex sourness of the Thames. It is what it is, and it is everywhere. The streets of the city are cleaned every morning by the crossing sweepers who will arrive in another hour. But at 5 a.m, they haven't arrived yet, and the previous day's deposits are still where the animals left them, and the night's damp has done nothing to improve the situation. Your boots navigate by memory. You step around the worst of it, not all of it. Some of it is unavoidable. You've stopped worrying about it the way you've stopped worrying about the fog smell. It becomes part of the texture of the walk, something to manage, not something to catastrophize about. A dray horse is being led out of a yard to your left. The animal is enormous, 17 hands at least, some vast Shire horse or Clydesdale, black as coal except for white socks on its back feet. Its breath puffs great clouds in the cold air, much larger than your own breath clouds, and it watches you with one enormous eye as it passes. The eye is brown and liquid and somehow very calm, given that this animal has a working life of roughly 12 years, hauling things through London before it becomes food for something. The man leading it is short and stocky, wearing a leather jerkin and a battered felt hat, and he doesn't look at you at all. He's focused entirely on the horse. The horse requires focus. A Clydesdale in a narrow London street at 5 a.m. is not something you manage with half your attention. You press yourself against the far wall to let them pass. The horse's flank moves past you at eye level. The animal warmth is extraordinary. You can feel it through your coat, a radiating heat from all those working muscles, all that metabolic life. The smell is strong and close. Hay and dung and the particular animal smell of something very large and very alive. Then they're past. The heavy patient clip of iron shoes on cobble retreating into the fog. You move on. You've been thinking, as you walk, about how to explain to someone who hasn't walked London at 5 a.m. what it sounds like. Because the sounds are wrong, not bad wrong. They're just wrong in the sense that they don't match anything you'd expect from a city of 3 million people. There's no roar. The roar that defines London in the daytime, that accumulation of every kind of human and mechanical noise into one continuous overwhelming sound. That's not there yet. What's there instead is a series of individual sounds, each one distinct and isolatable, floating in the fog like separate objects. A church bell somewhere to the north, striking the quarter hour, followed a beat later by another bell from a different church, slightly different in tone, slightly different in timing. Then a third further away. London has 110 parish churches within the city walls, and within sound of them. You've been counting the bells for 6 months. You've given up trying to identify them all. But you know the particular double strike of St Mary le Bow on Cheapside, which is the bell that historically defines who is a true Cockney. You have to be born within the sound of it. And you know the lower, slower toll of St Paul's Cathedral a few streets further west, which sounds more like a statement than a bell, the way everything about St Paul's sounds more like a statement than itself. Somewhere below all the bells, water, always water. Not the river now. You're far enough from the river that you've lost the river sounds, but other water. The small sounds of a city where water moves through drains and gutters and pumps and standpipes. Water is never far from you in Victorian London. Sometimes that's good, mostly it's not. A cat cries from somewhere above, second floor window probably, or third. The cry is long and argumentative, the sound of an animal that has strong opinions about the temperature and would like someone to know. Footsteps behind you for a moment, then turning into an alley. Gone. The distant clatter of something metal, far off, possibly in Smithfield, which is where you're heading, and where the sounds of the morning market have been building for the past hour, as men and animals arrive from all directions in the dark, bringing the city's meat supply for the day. Here is the thing about Smithfield that they don't tell you before you move to London. People who don't live in London, and some people who do live in London but who live in the nicer parts, talk about Smithfield Market in the way you might talk about any large market. A busy place, plenty of activity, important for commerce. Absolutely central to how the city feeds itself. They don't tell you what Smithfield smells like at 5 a.m. in November, when the overnight trade is finishing and the day trade is beginning, and there are approximately 3,000 cattle carcasses in various stages of processing within a few acres of open-air market. You have to experience that yourself. You could have gone a different route. You could have gone west of Smithfield and approached Bart's from Giltspur Street without going through the market at all. You don't do that. You go through the market because 6 months ago, on your first morning walking to work, you went through the market by accident. You didn't know the area. You were lost. You took a wrong turn, and something happened that you still can't fully explain. The market horrified you. And it also fascinated you completely and immediately, in a way that nothing in Heckington and nothing in London before or since has managed to replicate. It is the most intensely alive place you've ever been. Alive in the literal sense. Full of life and death in equal measure, in quantities and proximities that your rural upbringing prepared you for better than it prepared most of the young men you work with at the hospital, who grew up in cities and for whom meat appears, as if by magic, at the butcher's counter. You know where meat comes from. You've helped your father slaughter pigs. You've watched cows die and understood it as a transaction between necessity and reality. Uncomfortable, but true. Smithfield is that transaction at a scale that turns your stomach even while it impresses you. And you come through it every morning because you've decided that the things that turn your stomach are often the things worth understanding. That's a thought you had about London generally, at some point in your first month here. It's turned out to be surprisingly applicable. You turn off the main road and into the market, and the noise hits you first. Not the smell. The noise. A dense, layered animal noise. The bellow of cattle, low and rhythmic and resonant. The kind of sound that travels through the ground as much as through the air. The squeal of pigs somewhere beyond the cattle section. A sharper sound, more urgent, with a distress in it that bothers you in a way the cattle sound doesn't, and you've spent enough time in Smithfield to know why. The pigs know. Cattle are confused. Pigs understand the situation. Above the animal sounds, men's voices, dozens of them calling to each other across the market in the particular clipped shorthand of people who have worked together so long they've developed their own language. Numbers mostly, weights, prices. A question shouted across 50 yards of market sounds like something in a foreign language until you've been here often enough to pass it. 7 and 6 for the whole rack. 7 for the rack and I'll take the offal. 7 and 3. Done. The language of commerce, shorter and sharper than the negotiating language of a shop, because here things are happening fast and in quantity, and the whole market has a momentum to it, a forward motion that doesn't allow for lengthy consideration. Then the smell arrives. Or rather, you arrive in the smell, because the smell has been here all night, and it is you who are moving, not the smell. Blood, sawdust, something beneath the blood that is the smell of opened bodies, not putrid, not rotten, but raw. The smell of inside things on the outside, the smell of meat before it becomes the thing in the window or on the table, the smell of the process that produces food, which is not, it turns out, a clean or comfortable process, but which keeps 3 million people alive, and which therefore continues every day regardless of how clean or comfortable it is. Sawdust is everywhere underfoot. They lay it to absorb the blood, and fresh sawdust goes down every morning, and by the time the market closes at 9 or 10, the sawdust will be dark red and saturated, and they'll sweep it up and put down more. There are men whose entire job is managing the sawdust. You know one of them slightly, a man called Deeks, who has been doing this for 20 years, and who has the calm demeanour of someone who has made their peace with their circumstances entirely. Your boots crunch and slip slightly in the sawdust. You can feel the texture of it through the thin soles, a slight give, a slight slide, nothing like cobblestones. You navigate between the stalls and the carcasses hanging from iron hooks. The carcasses are enormous, full beef carcasses split down the spine, the two halves hanging side by side on great iron gambrels. In the gaslight and the fog they have a strange quality, these things that were walking and breathing yesterday and are now arranged here in these precise bilateral halves like anatomical diagrams. Your work at the hospital has given you a different relationship to bodies, human and otherwise, than most people maintain. You look at a hung carcass and you see muscle groups. You see where things attach. You see the engineering of life laid bare. Mr. Aldous, the senior surgeon at Bart's, would either approve or be horrified by this. You haven't decided which. A butcher's boy comes through carrying a quarter of beef on his shoulder, moving at a trot, his face red with effort. The weight of what he's carrying must be 150 pounds at least, and he is not much bigger than you and probably a couple of years younger, and he moves through the market with the practiced efficiency of someone who does this 40 times a day and has built the muscles for it. You step aside. He passes. As the air he displaces smells of cold meat and boy sweat. Ahead of you the market lanterns. Not gas here. The stalls use oil lamps, dozens of them hung from hooks and poles, make a warm irregular glow in the fog. The light catches the steam rising from a brazier where a woman is selling coffee from a large copper pot. Real coffee, or what passes for real coffee in a Smithfield Market stall. Dark, hot, bitter, with a texture that suggests the grounds were not entirely strained out. A penny for a cup. You stop. You have 17 shillings and 4p left from last Friday's wages. You need to make it last until Friday. A penny is a penny. You stop anyway. You pay the penny. The cup is a thick china thing, slightly chipped at the rim, warm in both hands. The coffee hits your throat with an assertive confidence that nothing you've drunk this morning has previously demonstrated. It is hot and it is bitter, and it tastes, underneath the bitterness, of something vaguely medicinal, and it is the best thing in the world right now. The heat moves down your throat and into your chest, and something in your chest that has been slightly contracted with cold since you woke up releases, just a fraction. Opens up. You stand there with both hands around the cup, feeling the heat move through the china into your palms. Your hands are cold. They've been cold since you put them into the November air on Tooley Street. Your fingers are stiff in the way that cold fingers are stiff. Not painful exactly, but unresponsive, like they're running on yesterday's instructions rather than today's. The heat from the cup is working through the stiffness slowly, the way heat always works through the cold. Not dramatically, not instantly, just steadily. First of the morning, the woman asks. She's maybe 50, grey hair under a white cap, face as weathered as old wood. She's been here since 3, probably since 2. Something like that. Hospital? You look at her. The coat, she says. Seen your lot come through every morning, the hospital men. She refills someone else's cup without looking. The surgeons come through on the way home, the porters on the way in. Different times. Porters, you say, she nods. Like this is information she already had. Heavy work, that. Some days. Good work, though. Proper work. She means it as a compliment, not as comparison. You take it as one. You drain the cup. Hand it back. Then move on through the market, past the lambs and the pig carcasses and the great purple beef livers laid out on clean white cloths, past the men whose hands are permanently stained a dark rust colour that never quite washes out, past the boy sleeping on a pile of empty sacks in the corner of one stall, insensible to the noise and the smell, dead to the world in the way that only the very young and the very exhausted can be dead to the world. On the far side of the market you emerge onto Giltspur Street, and there, rising out of the fog ahead of you and to the left, is St. Bartholomew's Hospital. The gatehouse is medieval. That's the first thing, always the first thing, that you register when you arrive at Bart's in the morning. This gatehouse, with its arch of weathered stone and the statue of King Henry VIII above it in its alcove, has been standing since 1702. The hospital behind it has been on this site since 1123. You were taught your English kings in school, in that rote way that rural schoolmasters taught things in the 1850s, memorised in sequence until they became a kind of verbal wallpaper. William the Conqueror was in 1066. You know that the way you know your own name. St. Bartholomew's Hospital was founded in 1123, 57 years after the Norman Conquest, when the Crusades were still happening, when this whole area was fields outside a medieval city. They've been healing people on this patch of ground for 740 years. The gatehouse arch is maybe 18 feet tall, wide enough for a carriage, and the stone of it is worn smooth at shoulder height where 740 years of hands have brushed it in passing. Your hand does it too, every morning, brushes the stone of the arch as you pass through. You do it now. cold stone, smooth with use, and under your palm the faintest texture of a surface that has been touched more times than there are words to count. Through the arch and into the courtyard. The courtyard is large for a hospital, or large for anything in this part of the city. Maybe 150 feet square, with the hospital buildings rising on 3 sides, brick and stone, 4 stories, the windows dark at this hour except for a few on the ground floor that show lights where the night staff are still at work. The fountain in the centre is dry in November. The pump house nearby is running, though you can hear it, the faint rhythmic thud of the mechanism that pushes water up to the wards on the upper floors. Water, in a hospital, is one of those things you think about differently after you've worked here for 6 months. You've heard Mr. Aldous and Dr. Pemberton argue about water, not where to get it. That's settled, they have proper supply now, but about what to do with it. Dr. Pemberton has been following the work of a Scottish surgeon called Joseph Lister, who's been experimenting with carbolic acid solutions to clean wounds and instruments. Mr. Aldous thinks this is interesting but unproven. Dr. Pemberton thinks it will change everything. You're not a surgeon. You carry things, but you listen to these arguments when you can, because they are not abstract arguments. They are arguments about whether the people in the beds you wheel around the wards will die of infection after their operations, and the answer to that question is currently yes, approximately 40% of the time, and the question of how to change that answer feels like the most urgent question anyone in this building could be asking. 40%. That's a number you couldn't have told you 6 months ago. You know it now, the way you know the route from Tooley Street. Because you had to. Because it's real. Because it lives in this place where you spend your days. The porter's room is at the ground level of the west wing, down a short corridor that smells of lye soap and something the matron uses to clean the floors, less something carbolic adjacent that is sharp and institutional, and which you've come to associate so completely with arriving at work that when you encounter it elsewhere in the city, your body responds before your brain does, straightening slightly, becoming more alert. The physical memory of a place. Mr. Clegg is already there. Mr. Clegg is always already there. You don't know when Mr. Clegg arrives. You suspect Mr. Clegg doesn't leave. You've had this thought before and have not been able to disprove it. He's standing by the small iron stove in the corner, warming his hands, and he looks at you over his shoulder when you come in. Wick. Mr. Clegg. He looks at the clock on the wall. The clock shows 14 minutes before 6. He says nothing about the time. This is, in its way, an acknowledgement. Mr. Clegg would say something if you were late. His silence is, in the language of Mr. Clegg, approval. He's a short man, Mr. Clegg, barely 5'4" in his middle 50s, with a face that has been shaped by several decades of indoor hospital air into something pale and precise, and hands that are remarkable. Wide across the knuckles, thick in the fingers, the hands of a man who has spent 30 years lifting and carrying things that most people don't carry, and whose hands have accordingly become tools in themselves. He's been at Bart's since 1831. He was here when they demolished the old ward block and built the new one. He was here during the cholera epidemic of 1832. He was here during the one in 1849. He knows where everything is, has been, and probably will be. And he knows the hospital the way you know your own body, automatically, without needing to think about it in the dark. Busy night, he says, which is how he begins most mornings, regardless of whether it was or wasn't. It's a conversational piece of rope thrown for you to catch. What have we got? He turns from the stove. 3 emergency admissions from overnight, 2 accident cases from the railway excavations. He means the underground railway they're digging in Paddington, which is generating a steady supply of patients. And 1 woman from Clerkenwell, not sure what. The night staff are still working on it. Then your regular rounds, 2 in surgery today, Dr. Aldous at 8 and the other at 10. The surgical list is on the board. He nods at a chalkboard on the wall where the day's procedures are listed in a neat hand you've never seen produce, because whoever writes it must arrive before even Mr. Clegg. You look at the board. 2 procedures in the morning, then the afternoon rounds, checking the wards, moving patients as directed, carrying things from one part of the hospital to another in the endless logistical work that keeps the place functioning. Clean dressings from the supply room to the wards, instruments from the theatre to the sterilising room, or rather, because the concept of sterilising instruments doesn't yet fully exist in the consciousness of this hospital, to the room where they're wiped down and stored. There's linen to be changed on 17 beds on the upper floor, waste to be removed, or coal to be fetched for the ward fires. This is your day. You take off your coat, hang it on the peg assigned to you. Under the coat, your working clothes are drabber than what you walked in wearing. A heavy canvas apron goes over your waistcoat, coarse to the touch, its stiffness a combination of the canvas itself and what the canvas has absorbed over the weeks of use. You tie the apron strings behind your back. Your fingers have gotten better at this over 6 months. Less fumbling, more automatic. The knot you tie is secure and flat out of the way. You're ready to work. The first thing you do every morning is help Mr. Clegg with the coal. The hospital has 16 stoves and fireplaces across the ward blocks, plus the cooking range in the kitchen, plus the furnace in the boiler house that provides the hot water supply. All of this requires coal, and coal requires fetching, and fetching coal from the cellar to the wards is, hour for hour, the most physically demanding thing you do. The coal cellar is at the far end of the building from the wards. The wards are 4 floors up. You do the arithmetic each morning without meaning to. It's become a habit, like adjusting the boot cloth. Each scuttle, the iron bucket designed for coal, with a long spout for pouring, holds about 30 pounds when full. You carry 2 at a time, 1 in each hand, using the iron handles that over the past 6 months have raised parallel calluses across your palms that you now no longer notice except when something presses directly on them. 16 stops across 2 trips, 190 pounds of coal per trip. Your own weight is approximately 140 pounds. You are carrying significantly more than your own weight in coal through the hospital every morning. This is not unusual. This is the work. Your hands know the weight now. There's a moment at the beginning of each lift, fingers wrapping around the cold iron handle, tightening, taking the strain as you shift the weight, where your whole body reports on the day's condition. Today your hands are stiff from the cold walk. Your left shoulder is tight from sleeping on it awkwardly. The small of your back has a low warning note that isn't pain yet, but is in correspondence with pain. You lift. Both scuttles come up. The weight settles into your grip and your arms and your shoulders and your legs. You walk. The hospital corridors at 6 in the morning are half light and quiet relative to what they'll be in 2 hours. Oil lamps on the walls, and the ones not yet switched over to gas casting uneven warm light. The floors are stone, worn smooth in the centre of the corridor where feet have crossed them for generations. Your boots make their particular sound, that scrape-clunk pattern, but muffled now, less sharp than on the cobbles outside. You pass a ward door and the smell that comes through it is different from everything else in the hospital. carbolic and lye, and the organic undertow of a room full of sick people, the particular humid warmth of human breath in quantity. Not unpleasant exactly, not pleasant either. Specific, irreducible. Through the glass panel in the door, you can see a nurse moving between beds, her back to you, moving efficiently in the controlled way that the nurses here move. Nothing wasted, no gesture without purpose. The nurses at Bart's are trained differently from a few years ago. Miss Nightingale's work during the Crimea has changed things, is changing things. The way that a stone dropped in water changes the water, not all at once, but in widening rings that take years to reach the edges. The nurses now keep records, write things down. The nurses of 10 years ago, by all accounts, kept rather different records and wrote rather less things down, and were employed for somewhat different reasons than strict medical competency. You know this because Mr. Clegg has opinions on it, and Mr. Clegg shares his opinions. The old matrons, Mr. Clegg has told you, in the tone of a man who both respects and slightly mourns the past, were characters. Mrs. What's-her-name, who was matron here before my time, she ran the hospital on gin and force of personality. And the gin was for her and the force of personality was for everyone else. She was there for 30 years and the mortality rate was what it was. But nobody worried about the mortality rate the way they worry about it now. Is that good or bad? You had asked. Yes, said Mr. Clegg. You carry the coal up the stairs to the first floor ward. The stairs are stone, worn at the centres, the iron handrail cold under your wrist where your hand is full of scuttle handle. You don't rush on the stairs with a load. Rushing on stairs with 30 pounds in each hand ends one way, and it's not a way you want to experience. Steady. Left foot. Right foot. The weight pulls at your shoulders with each step. You feel it most at the hip flexors weirdly. Not in your arms, which have adjusted to the hanging weight, but in the front of your hip where the lifting posture puts strain. First floor landing, ward doors to the left. You push through with your shoulder, and the warmth of the ward hits you first, and then the smell, and then the sounds. The low breathing and shifting of 22 people in iron beds arranged in 2 rows down the length of the room. The high windows showing a grey pre-dawn light that does nothing useful but exists. You go to the stove at the end of the ward. The night nurse, it's Collins tonight, a woman of about 35 whose face has the quality of someone who has learned to function at high level on inadequate sleep, looks up from her notes. Wick. Miss Collins. Coal. She nods, goes back to her notes. You open the stove door with the iron poker, stirring the overnight embers that are still live underneath the grey ash. The heat from the stove is immediate and specific, not the dispersed warmth of the whole room, but a concentrated radiance that makes the skin on your hands tighten and prickle. You pour the coal in carefully, not enough to smother the embers. Small pieces first, the way you learned in the first week when Mr. Clegg watched you do it wrong, and then explained with economy why you'd done it wrong. Then larger pieces on top, and you adjust the damper slightly, and the stove ticks and hisses as the new coal catches, and the warmth increases by a degree that you can feel on your face even as you step back. Around you, in the beds, the ward is beginning to wake in small increments. A cough from the left, a shift in a mattress from the right. Someone murmuring something unintelligible. These are the medical cases, the non-surgical ward. Fevers primarily, pneumonia, several cases. A man with a leg injury from a construction accident who's been here 3 weeks, and whose leg, from what you overhear of the medical discussions, may or may not be saved. The infection has been controlled, but controlled is not the same as beaten. You don't know their names. You're not supposed to know their names, in the sense that a porter's relationship to a patient is transactional. You carry them when they need carrying, you help them when they need helping with specific physical things, and the rest of it, the illness, the fear, the long days in the bed, is not yours to address. You know their names anyway. You learn them inevitably, in the way you learn anything that you're around consistently enough. The man with the leg injury is Mr. Farquharson. He's from Edinburgh, which you know because he tells you every time you bring coal to the ward, unprompted, as though your continued presence is a kind of permission to speak. Porter, Edinburgh, 37 years, 3 children. It comes out in that order, like a telegram. You don't know what happened to his leg exactly. You know it involved a scaffold collapse on a building site in Clerkenwell. You know it was 3 weeks ago. You know that 3 weeks ago he was a working man with a working body, and now he is a working man in a hospital bed, and the distance between those two states is the distance between everything and nothing, and yet it is a distance that can be crossed in one bad Tuesday afternoon. You empty the second scuttle, take both scuttles back down for refilling. This repeats. By 7 o'clock you have heated the hospital. This is not a figure of speech. You and Mr. Clegg, working in relay, have carried sufficient coal to 16 locations across 4 floors that the building has gone from the chill of overnight to something that registers, to a body that has been out in the November dark, as warm. Your hands, which were stiff and cold at 5:30, are now the opposite problem. They are warm and slightly swollen at the knuckles from the repeated gripping, and the calluses on your palms have the particular tight discomfort of skin that has worked harder than it wanted to. There's a red mark across the base of your right index finger where the left scuttle's handle sits at an angle, and pressing on it confirms that yes, and that's a thing that's happening. You press on it again. Yes, still happening. There's a pump in the yard where you can wash your hands with the brown soap that the hospital provides in a lump by each pump station. The soap is harsh enough that it's taken a layer of skin off your knuckles over 6 months, and they've grown back tougher and drier. But the soap does what it does. It cleans. You're thinking about the soap actually as you wash, about Dr. Pemberton's arguments with Mr. Aldous about carbolic acid. You've been turning over, in the quiet of the walks to and from work, this question of cleanliness and disease, which is not an abstract question when you spend your days in a building where 40% of surgical patients die of infection. The current theory, not universal but dominant, is miasma. Disease comes from bad air, from the smell of poverty and rot and sewage. This explains, in the framework of miasma theory, why the poor get sick more often than the rich. They live in worse-smelling places. The problem with miasma theory, which you've worked out for yourself in those long walks through the London air, is that it doesn't explain why patients operated on by surgeons who clean their instruments get sick less than patients operated on by surgeons who don't. The air in both operating theatres is the same air. And yet, Dr. Pemberton uses this argument. Mr. Aldous listens politely and says that the evidence is preliminary. You dry your hands on the rough cloth hanging by the pump. The cloth is grey-white, damp already from earlier use. You're careful about where you dry. The palm, not the knuckles, not the red mark. The yard is lighter now than when you arrived. Not light exactly, the fog hasn't lifted and won't until well past 9 on a day like this. But the darkness has graduated into a murky half-light that suggests the sun is attempting something somewhere above the cloud and fog and coal smoke, giving it its best, making limited progress. A crow is sitting on the pump handle you just used. It watches you with a sideways fixed intelligence, head tilted, considering. Crows in London have a quality that crows in Lincolnshire don't have. Lincolnshire crows are cautious. London crows have made a calculation about human beings, specifically about how much proximity a human being will tolerate before they react. And they've calibrated their behaviour to exist exactly on the far side of that threshold. They will take food from your hand. They will steal things. They have been stealing things from the hospital yard for as long as there has been a hospital yard, and they have no intention of stopping. This one regards you, decides you have nothing worth taking, and flies off toward the gatehouse. You watch it go. At 7:30, Mr. Clegg sends you to the accident ward. New admission from last night, he says. Railway. They need help getting him to the surgical ward for assessment. He doesn't say anything else. He doesn't need to. You know what a railway accident admission means. You've helped with 3 in the 6 months you've been here, and each time was different in its specific details and the same in its general shape. A man, usually a labourer, always a labourer, because the men directing the excavations stand back, brought in from one of the construction sites that are currently engaged in driving underground railway lines beneath the city. The tunnelling is done with picks and shovels and gunpowder and the wrong amount of planning, and the accidents happen with a frequency that the hospital records as routine. The accident ward is at the end of the east wing ground floor. The man in the bed is called, according to the night nurse's board, Patrick Donnelly. He's from County Clare, Ireland. He's 26 years old. He was brought in at 2 in the morning by his crew boss, who apparently waited 4 hours after the accident before deciding that yes, the arm was broken in a way that exceeded the capacities of the crew's usual approaches to injury management. He is awake, which surprises you. With that kind of injury and that kind of night, you'd expect unconsciousness. But he's awake and his eyes are open and following you when you come in, and his face is very still in the way that faces go still when the person inside them is managing a great deal and managing it by not moving. Mr. Donnelly, I'm Wick, I'm a porter. I'm going to take you up to see the surgeon. Right, he says. One word. Precise. Conserved. The arm is splinted. Someone on the night crew did this correctly, which isn't always the case. And the splint is a straight piece of wood with bandaging, which is functional if aesthetically bleak. His coat is cut away at the right shoulder to accommodate it. The coat, you notice, was good once. Not new now, but the weave of it is better than what labourers usually come in wearing. He's been here long enough to have saved for a good coat. You lower the side rail of the bed. The mechanism is iron and stiff, and you have to lean into it. Your shoulder takes the resistance, and then the rail drops with a clunk. I'm going to put the chair here beside you, and we'll get you sitting first, then standing if that's comfortable. Don't try to use the arm. I know, he says, another precise word. The chair is a wooden thing with a cane seat. Not entirely comfortable. Chosen because it has arms that allow someone with a splintered limb to lower themselves into it without bending in ways that aggravate the injury. He moves himself to sitting with a controlled economy of motion that tells you he's managed pain before, not this pain, but pain. The kind of man who doesn't display suffering because displaying it feels like losing something. His face, when he sits upright and the blood redistributes with the change of position, goes briefly a remarkable colour. Not pale, past pale to something almost greenish, the colour of a face that is having a biological crisis of the autonomic variety. Give it a moment, you say. He gives it a moment. The colour comes back, incompletely. Right, he says, third time. The same word. a system of communication of which this word is apparently the primary element. You help him to his feet. He's taller than you, 6 foot or close to it, and heavier, with the build of a man who digs for a living, which means his arms and back and legs are differently proportioned than you're used to. The uninjured arm is round-muscled and thick from the shoulder to the wrist in a way that your arm is not. You put your shoulder under his good arm, and his weight shifts onto you, and you feel the gravity of it. This is a man who outweighs you by at least 40 pounds, and he is not at his most stable, and the corridor between here and the surgical assessment ward is 2 floors up and involves 3 turns. You brace. Take it slow, you say. Right, says Mr. Donnelly. You go. Here is what they don't tell you about working in a hospital before you start working in one. They tell you about the medicine. They tell you about the importance of the work, the serving of the sick and injured, the machinery of healing. They might mention, if they're being thorough, that the work is physically demanding. What they don't tell you is that the primary experience of the job is weight, physical weight, human weight, the weight of bodies that need moving, which is a specific and particular kind of weight unlike any other. An iron scuttle of coal is 30 pounds and it hangs from a handle, and you can adjust your grip and your posture until you find the configuration that works. A person is 150 pounds, and they are warm, and they have their own ideas about how they want to move, and they are sometimes frightened and sometimes angry and sometimes insensible, and you have to work with all of that while also managing your own body and the narrow hospital corridors and the doors that never open the way you want them to. The weight of Mr. Donnelly is particular and human. You can feel the warmth of him through his coat. His breathing against the top of your head, he's that much taller, in a rhythm that is slightly too fast and too controlled, the rhythm of someone who is concentrating very hard on not making a sound. First step up, you say, before the first step. He takes it. The arm in the splint shifts slightly and his breathing changes for a second and then he controls it back. You feel the adjustment through his shoulder. You think about your father, briefly, in a way that makes no narrative sense but does make emotional sense. Your father, who is in Lincolnshire right now doing whatever farmers do in November, who sent you to London because the farm couldn't hold 4 sons, and who has received 2 letters from you and sent one back, a brief thing in his careful hand that said he was well, and your mother was well, and the bottom field had been replanted, and which did not say that he missed you or hoped you were managing, but which you read that way anyway. You get Mr. Donnelly to the first landing. Stop here, you say, and you stop. And he leans against the wall and breathes, and you stand beside him and wait, and the landing is cold and dim and smells of lye soap, and it is 5 to 8 in the morning. Long night, you say. Not a question, more of a receipt. An acknowledgement that you know what his night was. He says nothing for a moment. Then, 3rd time I've seen a man brought up from a collapse. First time it was mine. You don't say anything to that. It doesn't seem to need a response. How long, he says, meaning the arm. How long until it heals? I'm not a surgeon, but you'd know. 6 weeks, maybe 8, before you can work it at full capacity again. Depends on what the break looks like. The surgeon will tell you properly. 8 weeks. For a man who is paid by the day, who has no work means no wages, 8 weeks is an arithmetic with only one answer, and it's a bad one. He knows this. The knowledge is already in his face. Right, he says. You take him the rest of the way. The surgical assessment room is on the 2nd floor, south side, and it catches the morning light. What there is of it through the fog. Better than most rooms in the hospital. Mr. Aldous is there already, which surprises you because it's 3 minutes to 8. Then again, you were already here at 6, and Mr. Clegg before that, and the night nurses before that, and someone baked bread at midnight to have it ready by dawn. The city doesn't sleep cleanly. It fades and brightens and fades, but the corners are always occupied. Mr. Aldous is 41 years old, tall, and has the quality of competent men who have chosen a demanding profession, an efficiency of movement, a focused quality of attention that is not quite warmth and not quite coldness, but something precise and professional that manages to be both human and removed at the same time. He wears his collar very white and very stiff. His hands are large and clean with a cleanliness that goes beyond the morning's washing. You've seen those hands work. In the theatre, during the operations, you're allowed to observe from the back, and you have availed yourself of this whenever you're not needed elsewhere. Every time, his hand's the part of the operation that makes the most sense. Everything else in the operating theatre of 1863 is slightly horrifying to watch. The speed necessitated by the absence of better anaesthesia, the students packed around the table watching and occasionally commenting, the smells that a thorough description of would keep someone awake in the wrong direction entirely, but the hands are coherent. The hands do what needs doing. "Whack," he says, acknowledging you without looking up from the notes he's reading. "Mr. Donnelly, sir. Railway accident last night. Right arm. Suspected compound fracture. Help him up on the table." You help him up on the table. Mr. Donnelly makes no sound. Mr. Aldous examines the arm for perhaps 4 minutes, or occasionally asking questions in a tone that's not unkind but is focused rather than gentle. "Does that hurt? And that? When I press here?" He cuts the splint bandaging with a pair of scissors and removes the wood carefully. Looks at the arm. You're standing to one side. You can see the arm. You've been here long enough to see what a bad break looks like, and this is a not as bad break. The bone has not come through the skin, which is the worst version. What has happened is still serious. The arm is swollen in a way that suggests things inside it are displaced, and the discoloration at the wrist implies more damage than is immediately visible, but it is in the category of things that heal. "Straightforward," Mr. Aldous says, with the particular use of straightforward that medical men use to mean within the range of procedures we understand how to perform, which is not the same meaning that the word has anywhere else in the English language. Set it today and dress it properly. 6 weeks, give or take. Mr. Donnelly says 6 weeks. 6, perhaps 7. You have somewhere to stay? A pause? Lodging house in Aldgate. Keep the arm elevated when you sleep. Don't lift anything heavier than a cup. Come back in a week for the dressing to be checked. He makes a note, looks up. Do you have family here? No, sir. Is there anyone? Another pause. Men from my crew. All right. Tell them you'll need help for a few days. He says this in the same focused tone as everything else, but there's something in it, in the fact of saying it, of acknowledging that there are people involved in this beyond the arm itself. That is not nothing. Mr. Donnelly looks at him. Thank you, he says. Not right. Specifically, thank you. The morning moves. This is the phrase you've settled on for what happens between 8 and noon at Bart's. The morning moves. Not quickly, and not slowly exactly. It has its own velocity, defined by the pace of the work rather than by the clock, and the clock and the work don't always agree. You carry Mr. Donnelly back to the accident ward after his assessment. Then you carry 2 armfuls of clean linen to the women's medical ward. The linens are fresh from the laundry room, still warm, which is the best that linen ever smells, a clean warmth like baking, but simpler, and stack them in the press at the end of the ward. Then you help Giddings, Suck, the other junior porter, shift a heavy cabinet from the supply room to the nurse's office on the 3rd floor. The cabinet is solid oak, 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall, and it has to go up 2 flights of stairs and around a corner at the top landing, and the corner is not wide enough for the cabinet to turn without both of you performing a series of awkward angled manoeuvres that involve pressed flat against walls, swearing under your breath. Giddings swears openly, you do it privately, and one moment where the cabinet threatens to take the banister rail with it. It does not take the banister rail. The cabinet reaches the office. Giddings sits down on the stairs and breathes heavily for a moment. He's 21 from Bermondsey, and has been at Bart's 2 years longer than you. And he is not more fit than you, but he is more visibly expressive about effort, which you have come to read as a cultural difference rather than a physical one. Right, Giddings says, which is either coincidence or the dominant vocabulary of London working men in 1863. Then the two of you go back down for something else. At 10 o'clock the second surgery of the day begins. You are not needed in the theatre. This is Dr. Pemberton's operation, and Dr. Pemberton has his own preferred arrangement of staff, and you are not in it. But Mr. Clegg sends you to stand by in the corridor outside the theatre, in case anything is needed, which is the hospital's way of not wanting to appear unprepared. You stand in the corridor. The theatre is on the ground floor, purpose-built. With a glass roof to let in maximum light, because until recently most surgery was performed by natural light. The flickering of oil lamps and candles being both inadequate for the purpose, and, in a room that uses ether for anaesthesia, slightly catastrophic in terms of fire risk. The glass roof is one of the newer additions to this particular theatre. You can hear, faintly, through the theatre door, the sounds of an operation in progress. You've been inside enough times to know what you're hearing. The occasional instruction from the surgeon, lower than conversation, clipped and direct. The metallic sounds of instruments. A sound you can't describe that is the specific sound of surgery on a body, which your mind has decided to process as abstract sound rather than the thing it actually is. This is the human brain's capacity for adaptation, and it is genuinely remarkable and slightly troubling in equal measure. The corridor smells of ether and carbolic, and the cold tile floor under your boots is hard and flat, and you shift your weight from left to right and back again to keep circulation moving in feet that, at 1.5 miles walked and 6 hours of standing and carrying into the day, are registering an opinion. You think about Mr. Donnelly, whether he's sleeping, whether the bone will set right, whether 8 weeks is enough to destroy the economics of a man who lives on daily wages. The answer to the last of those is almost certainly yes. The question is whether something else intervenes. The hospital has a small fund for patients in distress, Mr. And Clegg administers part of it with a secretive efficiency that you've never fully understood but have come to respect. Last month a woman from the fever ward, no family, no money, no place to go once the fever broke, left with a week's accommodation paid and a letter of introduction to a church charity in Whitechapel that assists discharge patients. You only know about this because you were sent with a letter, which you were told not to read, but which you have some understanding of, because Mr. Clegg sealed it very firmly and gave you a look that was information in itself. The hospital is not the machinery of pure medicine it pretends to be. It is also the machinery of human beings trying to manage the gap between the suffering in front of them and the resources they have to address it. Mr. Clegg manages this with the same competence and the same invisibility that he brings to everything else. You've been thinking, over the past few months about what you want to become. Not a porter forever, but you're not sure what you want to become. The hospital offers possibilities you couldn't have named before you came here. There is something called a medical student. The students are boys, some of them barely older than you, who pay fees to attend the lectures and the operations and the ward rounds, and who are learning, formally and expensively, what you are learning informally and at a wage. You don't have fees, you have wages, which are the opposite of fees, but you have access to the same operations if you position yourself correctly, the same ward rounds if Mr. Clegg sends you there, the same information if you listen. You're listening. The theatre door opens. Dr. Pemberton comes out, moving quickly, pulling off his gloves. He stops when he sees you. Wick. Good. I need you to take this to the pharmacy and wait for Mr. Farrar to prepare the dressing solution. Tell him it's for bed 7 in the surgical ward, and tell him I want the carbolic diluted at 1 part in 20, not 1 in 40 as he's been doing. 1 in 20. He looks at you. Repeat that back. 1 part carbolic in 20, sir. For bed 7, surgical ward, from Mr. Farrar. Good. He goes back into the theatre. You take the slip of paper he pressed into your hand, the prescription for the dressing, and go to the pharmacy. The pharmacy is in the east wing. A long, thin room that smells of everything and nothing simultaneously. A room where so many different chemical and botanical smells exist in such quantity and proximity that they cancel each other out into a sort of generalized medicinal impression, the way mixing all the colours of paint produces grey. Mr. Farrar is behind his counter, which is a heavy wooden thing with a marble surface, its surface stained with decades of use, in ways that marble is not supposed to stain, but does when the decades are Victorian and the use is pharmaceutical. He's a small man, Mr. Farrar, precise in his movements, precise in his dress, with wire-rimmed spectacles that he is constantly repositioning on his nose with his middle finger in a gesture of which he appears entirely unaware. You give him the prescription. He reads it. 1 in 20, he says. Doctor. Pemberton's specific instructions, sir. I know what he thinks. I have thoughts about what he thinks. He's already reaching for the bottles, though, so his thoughts on the subject are apparently not going to prevent him from following the instruction. The question is not whether carbolic acid at 1 in 20 is effective. It demonstrably is. The question is whether the resulting tissue damage is an acceptable trade-off, and Dr. Pemberton and I have different views on acceptable. He says this as he measures, precisely, using a glass pipette and a graduated beaker. You watch his hands. He doesn't look down while he measures. He measures by feel, and by the slight change of sound as liquid rises in a glass vessel, which is the kind of skill that 20 years of doing the same precise work produces. What do you think, he says, dumb without looking up. You're surprised. Mr. Farrar has never asked your opinion. About the carbolic? You've been watching procedures for 6 months. You've seen the dressings before and after. What do you think? You consider this carefully, because Mr. Farrar gives every impression of being a man who will remember what you say and hold you to it. I think bed 7 in the surgical ward last month had the same kind of wound as bed 3 the month before that, and bed 7 is healing faster. Bed 7 is Dr. Pemberton's patient. Mr. Farrar looks at you over his spectacles. And bed 3? Mr. Aldous, standard dressings. Another look. The spectacles get repositioned. You're either going to be very useful or very troublesome, Mr. Farrar says, handing you the prepared solution in a sealed glass bottle. And I'm not sure which yet. He means it as something between a compliment and a warning. You take it as both. By noon the fog is shifting. Not gone. Not lifted in the dramatic way of countryside fogs that burn off clean in morning sunlight, but shifting. The quality of the light in the courtyard has changed from the flat grey of total overcast to something more textured. The kind of light that suggests the sun is negotiating with the cloud cover, making partial progress. You eat your midday meal in the porter's room. Brown bread, a piece of hard cheese, a tin mug of the tea that Mrs. Cloak in the hospital kitchen makes in quantities that suggest she's provisioning for an army. The tea is not good tea. The tea is hot water that has met tea leaves briefly and maintains a distant memory of the encounter. Brown and vaguely warm and entirely sincere in its limitations. You eat standing up. Not because there's no room to sit, there are 3 chairs in the porter's room, but because sitting down at midday makes the getting up again significantly harder, and after you've sat down your legs start registering all the things they've been not registering all morning, and sitting is a commitment to a reckoning with that. Standing lets you stay in the temporary agreement you've reached with your body. We will continue to work and you will not tell me how tired you are. Giddings is on the chair, eating an apple with a cheerful disregard for his surroundings and discussing, to no one in particular, a woman he has met in Bermondsey who has a brother who's apparently a boxer of some regional distinction. You eat your bread, you drink your tea. You think about Mr. Donnelly's arm. In the afternoon, the fog lifts. It doesn't burn off dramatically. It retreats, gradually, like a tide going out. By 2 o'clock the courtyard is visible in its entirety, and the gatehouse arch is clear, and above the arch the pale November sky shows itself as genuinely pale rather than the uniform grey of the morning. At 2:30, Mr. Clegg sends you on an errand to the medical school on the south side of the square, to deliver a package of instruments to one of the lecturers who has apparently been waiting for them since yesterday. The medical school is attached to the hospital, but separate from it in a way that feels designed to make the distinction clear. The hospital is where the patients are, where the work happens, where the floors are stone and practical. The medical school is where the students learn, and it has a different atmosphere. Lecture halls, demonstration rooms, the small amphitheatre where clinical cases are presented for teaching purposes, and a different quality of noise. Voices talking about bodies rather than voices talking to them. You deliver the package to a man called Mr. Sinclair, who has the distracted quality of someone doing several things in his head simultaneously and managing only some of them. He takes the package. Doesn't say thank you. You're not offended. This is not a thank you environment. On your way back through the medical school corridor, you pass the lecture theatre. The door is open. You stop. Inside, a lecturer is talking to perhaps 40 students arranged in rising tiers of seats, and he is talking about the circulatory system. And he has a diagram on the board behind him, a large ink diagram of the human heart with its chambers labelled, and he is describing the mechanism of the valve, and you know what he's saying. You've read, in the evenings when you can borrow books, far more than an average hospital porter reads, and the circulatory system is not new to you. But there is something about the diagram and the voice, and the room full of people learning it together that stops you in the corridor doorway. You stand there for perhaps 3 minutes. Nobody notices you. You are a porter in a corridor. You're invisible in the way that working people are invisible in institutions that are not designed for them. Then you move on. But you carry the image of the diagram with you, the heart with its chambers, the clean lines of the illustration, and something about seeing it large and clearly labelled when you've only seen it small in books. At 4 o'clock there is an emergency. This is how Mr. Clegg describes it when he finds you in the supply room restocking the linen shelves. There's an emergency. Come. Mr. Clegg's emergencies are not dramatic. He delivers them in the same tone as everything else. The drama, if there is drama, comes from the thing itself. The thing itself is this. 2 boys, brothers, found unconscious in a basement room in Newgate Street. Brought in by a constable who had enough sense to recognise that this was a hospital situation rather than a police situation. They're in the accident ward now, and the question of what's wrong with them is not yet settled. You come. The boys are 8 and 10 years old. They are lying in 2 beds in the accident ward, and the beds pushed close together by Miss Collins, who is managing the ward this afternoon, and they are both deeply unconscious in a way that is different from sleep. Their colour is wrong, a greyish cast to the skin, particularly around the lips. Their breathing is audible from the doorway, slow and heavy and irregular, with long pauses between breaths that make the room tighten. Dr. Pemberton is already there, examining the older one, his stethoscope applied to the boy's chest. "What's the baseline?" he says. To you and to Miss Collins and to anyone who can answer. "Both brought in unconscious," Miss Collins says. "Constable says they were found in a locked room in a building being demolished on Newgate Street. The room had a brazier, no ventilation, carbon monoxide. The word isn't known yet, the science isn't there, but the situation is known. A charcoal or coal fire in an enclosed space produces a gas that has no smell and that kills. People have been dying of it in unventilated rooms for as long as there have been fires and rooms, and the management of it in 1863 is get the person into fresh air, keep them breathing, wait. Windows, Dr. Pemberton says. Open all of them, now." You move to the windows before he finishes the sentence. The windows in this ward are the old-fashioned push-up from the bottom type, heavy, the wooden frames swollen in the damp. You put your palms flat against the bottom rail and shove upward, the wood resistant. Your shoulders taking the strain. The window protests for a moment and then opens with a bang that's louder than you intended. Cold November air floods in. "Good," Dr. Pemberton says. "Do the next one." You do the next one, and the third. The ward becomes cold immediately, the carefully banked stove heat rushing out, the temperature dropping several degrees in minutes. The patients in the other beds, the fever cases, the medical cases, stir and complain. Miss Collins moves among them with the efficient calm she applies to everything, redistributing extra blankets with the practical authority of a woman who knows that 2 unconscious children are temporarily more important than the comfort of the conscious ones. Dr. Pemberton is talking to the younger boy, not because the boy can hear him, because it's something to do while you wait and watch the breathing. "Breathe," he says, quiet and direct like an instruction. You stand by the open windows. The cold air comes in. Your face is cold again, the same cold as 5 this morning, and you've come a long way around to end up cold in the same place you started." The older boy's breathing changes. It's subtle. The pauses between breaths, which have been stretching to 10 or 15 seconds, shorten. The interval goes from 15 to 10 to 8. The colour around his lips, still wrong, begins very slowly to shift. "That's it," Dr. Pemberton says, to no one specifically, to the room. The younger boy takes a breath that is louder than the ones before and then settles into a rhythm that is slower than normal but regular, the way a clock that has been running slow corrects itself back toward the right time. You stand at the window. The cold air keeps coming in. Outside the window, The courtyard of Bart's in the late afternoon, the fountain dry. The gatehouse arch, its pale stone visible now that the fog has gone. The crow on the pump handle, possibly the same crow, possibly another, they're impossible to tell apart. The bell on the hospital clock strikes 4:30. You stay at the window until Dr. Pemberton tells you the windows can go down. By 5 o'clock, both boys are breathing normally, not awake, still unconscious, but with the specific quality of unconsciousness that is sleep rather than the other thing. Their colour is better. The older one, when Miss Collins lifts his eyelid to check his eyes, responds. The pupil contracts in the lamplight the way it's supposed to. Dr. Pemberton says they will almost certainly recover fully. He says this without drama, the way he says most things. You help Miss Collins reposition the ward. Windows closed now. The evening cold coming on hard. The stove restoked by your hands. The extra blankets redistributed. The normal patients, who have spent 20 minutes being cold for somebody else's emergency, accept this restitution with the tolerance of people who have learned to accept the specific inconveniences of being in a hospital. Mr. Farquharson, the Edinburgh man with the leg, catches your eye as you pass his bed. The boy's all right, he says. He has an Edinburgh voice. Not a stage Edinburgh voice, but the real thing. Slightly flattened vowels, the particular directness of the city. They will be. He nods. Good. Like this has resolved something for him personally. Like the outcome of these stranger children was something he needed to know. You think about what it does to a person, weeks in a hospital bed. How much of your attention, when your own situation is limited to one room and one window, and the view from your pillow shifts to the situations of the people nearby, how much of the hospital's emotional energy is lateral, between patients, rather than from staff to patient and back. Mr. Farquharson is invested in those boys and has never met them and never will, and this seems correct to you in a way you can't fully articulate. At 6, you finish. The end of the shift is not marked by anything ceremonial. Mr. Clegg tells you the day's work is done and there's nothing remaining that can't wait for tomorrow, and you untie your apron and hang it on its peg and put your coat back on. Your coat feels different going on at the end of the day than it did coming off in the morning, heavier somehow, which is not physically accurate. The coat weighs the same, but your body is different from the body that arrived this morning, and the weight registers differently against it. You button it up. The brass buttons are cold. Your fingers, stiff again from the evening chill coming through the windows, fumble slightly on the top one. Good work today, Mr. Clegg says, not looking up from his ledger. You look at him. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't look up. The statement stands alone, already complete and already moved past. Thank you, Mr. Clegg. You go out through the gatehouse arch. Your hand finds the stone, cold, smooth, the irreducible permanence of it. The walk home is different from the walk in. Yet this is one of the things about a walk you do twice daily that you've only recently started to appreciate. It's never actually the same walk. The direction is reversed, obviously, but it's more than that. The light is different. The sounds are different. The city is in a different part of its daily cycle, and you are in a different part of yours, and the two differences interact to make something that is technically the same route, and actually an entirely different experience. At 6 in the evening, London is loud. The midday lull, which is not quite a lull, which is more of a slight reduction in the morning's maximum intensity, is over. The evening rush is building in the way things built in 1863, which is not the same as things building in the modern sense because there are no underground trains yet, not finished ones, and no buses of the rapid kind, but there is a vast tide of people in motion on foot, and the streets reflect it. The Smithfield area is quieter. The market closed hours ago, the stalls are gone, the sawdust swept. But as you move south toward the bridge, toward the city and toward the river, the density increases. Gas lamps are lit now. All of them. The lamplighter you saw this morning on his extinguishing round is somewhere now on his lighting round. The reverse journey, the equal and opposite gesture that brackets the day. The lamps cast their amber glow on cobblestones that are wet from a brief rain that fell while you were inside and which you missed entirely. The cobbles reflect the gaslight in dark mirrors, orange elongated globes in the water between the stones, stretching and contracting as ripples move through the collected water. You walk south. Your feet hurt. Not dramatically, not in a way that makes you walk differently, but in the specific and pervasive way of feet that have been inside boots for 11 hours and have moved several miles and would like to be free of the boots now. The left heel, where the cloth pad has compacted over the course of the day, has lost most of its efficacy, and there is a cold, damp sensation in that corner of the boot that is exactly what you thought there would be and is annoying in exactly the way you predicted. You flex your toes, keep walking. The bridge at 6 is different from the bridge at 5 in the morning in every way. Crowded. Owed. The traffic in both directions forming something close to a confrontation. Pedestrians weaving between carts and carriages, and the occasional group of livestock being moved for reasons you can't determine in the press of it. You find your line through it, without thinking. The muscle memory of the route. Stay left. Use the strip of raised footway on the parapet side. Move steadily, don't stop. Below, the Thames. In the evening light, or what's left of it, the sky to the west showing a last pale greenish stripe above the buildings. The river is different from this morning. The water is darker, less silver, more the colour of old pewter. More ships visible in the pool, their masts a forest against the western light. The smell is the same. You put your hand on the parapet briefly as you walk. The stone is cold. Of course it is. The stone is always cold. Tooley Street. Mrs. Pardew's front door, and the black paint of it peeling at the bottom right corner where the wood has swollen and the paint has lost the argument. Your key. The lock. The smell of the house, which is cabbage again. Or still, you can't be sure if it's yesterday's cabbage or a new one. The question seems somehow secondary, and the creak of the stairs, navigated carefully, and the sound of Mr. Farrow's wagon driving silence above you because he's either still asleep or already back out. Your room. You sit on the bed and take off your boots. This is the best moment of the day. You have thought this before, on previous evenings, and you've come to accept it as an accurate assessment. The removal of your boots after 11 hours of wearing them is, on most days, the best moment. Not a dramatic moment, not a transcendent one. Just the cessation of something that has been a background condition all day, the release of it. The boots go on the floor by the door. Your feet, in their wool stockings, are damp with the day's work. You peel the stockings off. They come off with a reluctance that speaks to the day's exertion, and look at your feet. They are, as feet go, not in terrible condition. The left heel shows redness where the pad has been insufficient. Your little toes are white from being pressed together too long. The calluses on the ball of each foot, which have been developing since May, are thick and yellowish, and the texture of old leather. You are 17 years old, and you have old leather calluses on your feet. You find this remarkable and somehow correct. You don't go to a tavern tonight. You have the thought, or as briefly, Giddings mentioned something about a place in Borough High Street, and you dismiss it without particular effort. Your body has cast its vote, and its vote is stay. You eat downstairs with Mrs. Pardew. She serves this meal as she serves everything, with a practical warmth that doesn't pretend to be affection, but is not entirely separate from it either. She's a widow of 10 years standing, childless, who runs this lodging house with a strictness about rent and a flexibility about everything else that you've come to understand as the specific management style of a woman who has thought carefully about what she can and cannot control. Tonight it's a beef stew with potatoes. The beef is gristle heavy, but the gravy is good and the potatoes are properly cooked, which sounds like a low bar but isn't. You've had potatoes in London that were apparently cooked in theory only. You eat with focused attention. This is another thing that's changed in 6 months. Your relationship to food. In Heckington, meals were regular and expected. Here, a good meal at the end of a physical day is not something you approach casually. Mrs. Pardew talks, as she usually does, about the neighbourhood and its inhabitants, a running commentary on Tooley Street and its social dynamics that is not gossip exactly, but is not entirely distinct from gossip either. Someone has moved into number 43. Someone from number 21 has been seen in the company of someone whose reputation Mrs. Pardew characterises with a raised eyebrow and a compressed mouth. You eat and listen and respond at appropriate intervals. After supper you go back upstairs. The candle on the windowsill is a tallow candle, cheap, from the bundle you bought last week at the chandler's on Bermondsey Street. It gives a yellow light that is adequate for reading, and not good for anything requiring precision. You have, on loan from the hospital library, which exists, which lends to staff, which Mr. Clegg arranged for you with his usual combination of practicality and minimal explanation, a copy of a medical text, not a current one. A text from 1846, a treatise on the principles of physiology by a man called William Carpenter, which is 17 years old and in some respects outdated, but which covers the fundamentals clearly enough that you've been working through it chapter by chapter for the past month. You open it. The pages are slightly yellowed, the edges of some bent back by previous readers. The handwriting of several previous owners appears in the margins. Corrections, observations, a few arguments with the text, one reader who disagreed firmly with Carpenter on a point about the liver and has made this disagreement known in 3 separate footnotes. You like those marginal notes. They make the book feel like a conversation across time. The previous readers present in their pencil marks, still arguing. You read for an hour. What you're reading tonight is about the lymphatic system, which is less dramatic than the circulatory system, but which Carpenter makes interesting by describing it as a kind of secondary circulation, a parallel economy of fluid running alongside the blood economy, performing its own distinct functions. You think about this parallel economy, this hidden system within a system. You think about the boys in the ward, about the gas that replaced the air in that basement room, invisible and odourless and lethal, the way that too often the things that hurt you are the things you can't detect until they've already done their work. You think about Mr. Donnelly's arm set now, the bone beginning the slow process of remembering its own shape. You think about the crow on the pump handle. The candle makes a small sound as it burns, a tiny hissing, almost inaudible, the wax doing whatever wax does when it meets the flame. You've never thought about the sound of a candle before this past 6 months. In Heckington, the evenings were lit from the fire, and the fire made its own large sounds, and a candle's contribution was drowned out. Here in this room, in the particular urban quiet of a Southwark lodging house at 9 in the evening, you can hear the candle. You can hear almost everything at this time of night if you pay attention. The house settling, Mr. Farrow getting up somewhere above you. He works nights, starts at 10, and the particular creak of his footstep that you've learned to identify as his and not someone else's. The distant sound of traffic on London Bridge, thinned to something navigable at this hour, the last of the commerce moving off the bridge for the night. Below all of it, always, the river, the river. You think about the river sometimes, in these quiet hours, in a way that you didn't expect to think about it when you arrived. You expected the Thames to be a fact of London geography, the line dividing north from south, the thing you crossed twice a day. You didn't expect it to be something you'd have a relationship with, but you do. The Thames is the oldest thing in London. The city has been rebuilt a dozen times over. Plague, fire, plague again, rebuilding, demolition, rebuilding, and the river was there for all of it, and will be there when the current version of the city has become whatever comes next. It ran here before the Romans came. It will run here. It will be running here long after everything you've seen today has been demolished and replaced and demolished again. That is a strange thought. Lying in bed in November 1863, strange and oddly reassuring. Outside the window, Tooley Street is going to sleep. The last of the pedestrian sounds, footsteps, voices, the brief sharp laugh of someone leaving a pub, are trailing off. The gas lamp on the corner is still burning, so will burn until 6, and its amber light comes through your uneven window and makes a warped parallelogram on the wall opposite. You close the carpenter, put it on the floor beside the bed. You lie back. Your body has a lot to say about the day. Your shoulders are speaking, your left heel is speaking, your hands, both of them, the calluses and the red mark and the splinter's dull report, are speaking. Your feet have finished their earlier statement and have moved on to something more like a sustained low note, a continuous reminder of miles walked and hours stood. You listen to all of it without particular alarm. This is also something that's changed in 6 months. You've stopped treating your body's end-of-day reports as problems. They are information. They are your body telling you what it did today, which is a way of telling you who you are now. You're a person who has walked 2 miles in the dark and lifted coal and carried a man up 2 flights of stairs and opened windows in an emergency and stood at those windows long enough to watch someone breathe. That's who you are today. The candle, you should blow it out. You reach across and blow it out. Darkness. The kind of darkness that has no gradations, no lighter areas, no shapes visible in peripheral vision. Just dark. The dark of a room with a small window on a cloudy November night in a city where the only light is gas and the gas is on the street. You're not afraid of it. You weren't afraid of dark in Heckington either. Countryside dark, which is darker than city dark because there are no gas lamps, is something you grew up in. But the particular quality of urban darkness is different from the dark of fields, though you'd struggle to say exactly how. Maybe it's denser. Maybe it's the weight of all the people in it. You close your eyes. There's no useful distinction between closed and open right now. But the gesture of closing them is its own kind of settling, a declaration of intent. Tomorrow will begin at 5, or before 5, if your body decides it's been enough and wakes you early, which happens sometimes. your body running its own schedule alongside the one you've been given. Tomorrow you'll walk the route again, in the dark and the fog, across the bridge, through the market, through the gate. Mr. Clegg will be there. The stove will need lighting. There will be coal to carry and patients to move and things to be heard and things to observe. There will be something unexpected. There always is. The boys in the basement, Mr. Donnelly and his calculated conservation of the word right, the crow on the pump handle, Mr. Farquharson asking about strangers because that's what you do when you're limited to a bed and a view, and the lives of the people beside you become your whole geography. You can't know what it will be. The not knowing is the thing you've had to make your peace with, and you're making it slowly. The way the river makes its peace with the banks by wearing them down gradually rather than all at once. The city outside is doing what the city does. The night shift is beginning for the people who work nights. The last of the day shift is filtering home. The Thames is running, always running. The water taking no notice of the hour or the fog or the cold or the 740 years of hospital that stands on its northern bank. The night nurses in the wards at Bart's are checking the patients by lamplight. Mr. Donnelly's arm is elevated on a pillow, the bone inside it beginning its silent work of knitting itself back together. The boys from Newgate Street are sleeping with the deep, uncomplicated sleep of children who have survived something without understanding it. Mr. Farquharson, in his bed with his healing leg, is probably not sleeping. He lies awake a lot, you've gathered. Edinburgh is very far away from a hospital bed in Smithfield. 3 children is a very specific kind of weight to carry in a ward that does not have room for them. Somewhere in the city, a church bell strikes 10. Then another, slightly lower, slightly later, then a third from further away, barely audible through the closed window, barely audible through the fog that's coming in again off the river, the nightly return of it, predictable and dense. You've been thinking, in these last minutes before sleep, about what Mr. Farrar said this afternoon. Very useful, or very troublesome. I'm not sure which yet. You find you're not sure which yet either. In Heckington, the shape of a life was relatively clear. The farm, the seasons, the community, the repetition of a cycle that your father had lived and his father before him. It wasn't narrow exactly, but it was defined. The edges were knowable. Here the edges are not visible. The city extends in every direction further than you can see, in every social direction further than you can imagine. And the possibilities within it, including the possibility that a 17-year-old porter who reads medical texts in the evenings might someday do something other than carry coal upstairs, are not clearly defined. That uncertainty, which felt like terror in May, feels different now. Not comfortable, not safe, but like something you're becoming capable of inhabiting. The capability is different from the comfort. You're not there yet. But you're becoming capable of it. That's not nothing. Outside, the fog settles back over Tooley Street. It comes in from the river, the way it always does, the Thames exhaling its cold and complicated breath into the city air, and the city air absorbing it, the two of them indistinguishable in the dark. 740 years of hospital on the other side of the bridge. 740 years of people carrying their injuries to that courtyard, and other people, porters, nurses, surgeons, stewards, carrying things to and from the beds where the injured people lay. You are one of the carrying people. You carry coal and linens and patients and prescribed pharmaceutical solutions and the weight of your own small place in the machinery of the thing. The machinery keeps running. You are warm. You're adequately fed. Your boots are on the floor and your feet are free and the blanket is thin but sufficient. and the sounds of the city are settling into the sounds of the city at night, which are not silence, but are the next best thing. Your breathing slows. The river, somewhere below the window's ability to hear. The candle, cold and dark. The carpenter on the floor. Yeah, the unnamed previous owner's pencil still pressing against the paper in the margin of page 142, where he wrote, "This is wrong," in emphatic capitals. Still arguing with a man who died before you were born. Still correct. Something your father said once, when you were small, and asked him why the fields looked different in the morning from how they looked in the afternoon. He thought about it for a moment. Your father always thought before he spoke, which was a quality you appreciated more as you got older, and said, "Because you're different in the morning. The fields are the same." You weren't sure what he meant then. You're beginning to understand it now. You came through the fog this morning, and you come through the fog every morning, and the fog is the same fog, same river, same cold, same November, same London. It is always and irreducibly this city in this season doing what this city in this season does. But you're not the same. You're the accumulation of every morning you've walked that route, every coal scuttle, every patient, every crow, every cup of coffee from the woman in the market who knows you by your coat. The person walking south on London Bridge at 7 this evening is not the person who walked north across it at 5:30 this morning. Same route, same feet, same boots with the same failing left heel. Different in ways that don't announce themselves but exist anyway, compounding. That is how you become a person, not in moments of dramatic revelation, not in a single decision or event, in this, in the repetition of days, in the morning after the morning after the morning, in 6 months of 5 o'clock starts and 11-hour shifts and coal and carpenter and cold water in a basin and a blanket that is thin but enough, in a crow on a pump handle in a hospital courtyard in November, in the stone under your hand on a bridge that has been cold for 32 years. The sounds of the city come to you as if from a great distance, which they are not. You are in the city, you are of the city, but sleep pulls you away from it in stages, the way the tide pulls from a shore, and with each stage the sounds go further. The river, the lamp on the corner, the amber glow through the window, the parallelogram it makes on the wall, the parallelogram going dark behind your eyes, the dark going deeper, the silence within the noise going wider. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are safe enough. You have a roof and a route, and work that matters, and people who expect you to show up tomorrow and do it all again. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, more than enough. Centuries will pass. The bridge you crossed this morning will be demolished in 1973 and sold to an American businessman who will re-erect it in Arizona, because the 20th century has its own methods of not quite understanding what it's doing. The hospital you work in will still be standing, still functioning, still on the same medieval foundation, when people who haven't been born yet live in ways you cannot imagine. The fog will go. The coal fires that feed it will eventually be outlawed, and London will become incrementally a city where you can see across the river. The Thames will be tamed. Bazalgette sewers will be finished, and the Great Stink will become history, and the river will become something closer to a river and less close to what it is tonight. But people will still walk across London Bridge at 5 in the morning, still press their cold hands against the stone of it, still feel the weight of the city around them, its noise and its fog and its particular insistence on existing enormously and all at once. People will still be sick, and other people will still carry things to them and carry things away. Some things don't change. The cold under your hand on a stone wall, that doesn't change. The particular quality of exhaustion at the end of a day that has contained enough to fill a week, the way the body's report comes in as you're lying down, the catalogue of the day's work delivered in the medium of ache, that doesn't change either. And the moment before sleep, that threshold, the breath slowing, the sounds receding, the particular, not quite piece of a mind that has been running fast all day and is now finally receiving permission to slow, that's the same in every century, so let it come. Let sleep take you the way it takes everyone who has worked their body honestly and asked their mind to hold more than it was told it could hold, and walked further than they were certain their legs would go. Let the city go on without you, because the city will go on without you. It's been doing that since before you arrived, and it will do it after, and this is not a loss. This is the arrangement. This is the compact between a person and a place. Let the fog settle on Tooley Street. Let the Thames run. Let the coal in the hospital stoves burn down to red and grey in the wards where the night nurses watch and the patients sleep, and the boys from Newgate Street breathe in and out with the uncomplicated steadiness of people who have been given back their breathing and are not yet old enough to take it for granted. Let your boots stay on the floor. Let your hands rest. The calluses and the red mark and the deep, dull note of the splinter. Let the carpenter lie open on the floor at the page about the lymphatic system, the unknown reader's margin notes still pressing their arguments, still certain, still wrong in some things and right in others. Let all of it wait. It will still be there in the morning. The coal, the fog, the bridge, Mr. Clegg already at his post when you arrive, the crow on the pump handle, it will all be there. And so, after whatever sleep this night provides, will you? Good night.